Vegetable crops overview of hydroponic tomato. This presentation was developed by Dr. Thierry Kubota from the University of Arizona. So the purpose of this presentation is to give our overview of tomato crop production in the greenhouse environment. Hydroponic tomato production is one of the major activities going on under controlled environment. So the content includes introducing the standard system utilized in hydroponic production, and then the processes involved in the hydroponic tomato production, such as seeding, transplanting, grafting, and then also systems including nutrient delivery system, and then other key technologies to maintain high productivity. And a little bit about pest and disease management, harvesting, packing, and distribution. So this is a picture taken in a commercial greenhouse showing what we call Highwire production system combined with drip irrigation. So Highwire system because we use wire to support the tomato vine, and then plants are growing in very tall canopy, sometimes exceeding 3 meters or 10 feet. And then as you can see, very unique double row system. And then basically it is wrapped around, the vines are wrapped around within that row. And then you see that tomatoes are hanging at about 3 to 4 feet height. And ripened fruits are about the height, workers can easily harvest those fruits. And then notice that all the old leaves are removed from the vine so that only the leaves conducting photosynthesis at high efficiency are remained in the canopy, which is usually somewhere between 12 to 16 leaves per plant. And then if you look at the bottom of the system, you see slab and rock wall cubes, and then drip irrigation tubing going on, and then inserted into each cube. So compared to upper plant system, including leaves and fruits and stem, the root zone in the Highwire system, hydroponic system, is very, very limited. It's a very small amount of root zone, but the frequent irrigation system keep them alive, keep them active to support that big upper shoot or the leaves and stems and the fruits of the plant. So the production start from seeds. So uniformity of the seeds is very important, and then most commercial varieties or cultivars should have high germination rates greater than 90%. If the germination rates are very low, that may be because of the conditions you are using for germination. So the best performance in terms of germination and then also young seedling growth can be achieved under controlled environment chamber installed with artificial lighting. However, a standard practice in nursery, commercial nursery, is that seeds are germinated inside a controlled environment chamber, germination chamber, and then germinated seeds are moved to greenhouse environment to grow this kind of young seedlings. And nowadays, because transplant production technique is so specialized, most large greenhouse growers use transplants grown by separate commercial operation, commercial nursery, and particularly the case for grafted plants. Grafting is basically joining two different plants to make one fusion plant, just show in this diagram. So the scion is the cultivar for better fruit yield and quality, but may be lacking for vigor or specific disease resistance. So by grafting the scion onto the rootstock selected for the vigor or the disease, then you can get two characteristics together. One is for fruit and the other one is for root zone related characteristics such as vigor and disease. So various rootstock cultivars available from commercial seed companies, and growers can pick the best rootstock that works for their purpose. And often in North America, hydroponic tomato growers are selecting grafting to support year-round production to increase the yield in that long production cycle. And most grafted plants are imported from Canada because we don't have large nurseries in the US to provide greenhouse seedlings to tomato growers in the US. In Mexico, there are many grafting nurseries already established, and they can supply their own plants in Mexico, but not the case yet in the US. So we are relying on the plants and plant production capacity in Canada. Okay, so the first stage from transplanting to about fifth flower cluster is very critical because if you don't pay attention in this stage, plants may tend to be very vigorous or too vegetative. So growers usually try to suppress the vegetative action or vegetative growth and promote the flower development and fruit development. So we call that balancing vegetative and reproductive growth. So the first flower truss usually develops between 8 and 12 leaves. And this location is very important, and the lower nodal location is better than higher nodal location because lower location means faster in terms of fruit development. So growers can harvest earlier and not waiting too long to get first fruit harvestable. And then also second and third flower development, it is highly affected by nitrogen concentration of the nutrient solution. Too much vigorous vegetative growth sometimes cause flower abortion. Therefore, growers pay attention to the nutrient solution, particularly nitrogen concentration. So here is example of nitrogen concentration from seeding to the second flower cluster or transplanting to second flower cluster, only 90 milligram per liter or ppm concentration compared to the later stage. And then basically gradually increasing nitrogen concentration is recommended to balance the vegetative and reproductive growth. So from the second and fifth flower cluster, 120 milligram per liter, and then after the fifth flower cluster development, 190 milligram per liter. Accordingly, potassium can be increased because the fruit load is going to be increased to the later stage and beyond. So initially it is low, less than half, but increased to the standard conditions after fifth flower cluster developed. And this is a table showing the major elements and their concentrations of the different stage nutrient solution recommended for tomato. So again, stage 1 is transplanting to second flower cluster, having low nitrogen concentration, low potassium concentration. And stage 2 to second to fifth flower cluster, slightly higher nitrogen concentration, higher potassium concentration, And then after fifth flower cluster, finally the standard nitrogen concentration. So that's one of the commercial nutrient solution used in hydroponic tomato production. So nutrient delivery system is one of the key components of the technologies utilized in hydroponic production system. Typically, we use concentrated nutrient stock solutions, and typically we have two solution system, just separating calcium and iron from everything else. So out of three, two solutions are the nutrient solutions. One is calcium and iron containing fertilizers only, and the other one is everything else. And then additionally, growers usually have acid to adjust the pH value. Recommended pH value is somewhere between 5 or 5.5 to 6.5 or 7. Not exceeding 7 is what we recommend. And additional technologies needed for nutrient deliveries are injectors, and then also drip irrigation system. And drip irrigation system needs to be pressure compensated, otherwise the distribution of the nutrient solution is not going to be uniform. And growers need to have some sort of lysimeter set up to measure the amount of, the discharge or efflux solution, amount of influx or input solution. Growers sometimes call drip and drain. So the amount of drip and amount of drain needs to be quantified so that you know exactly how much nutrient solution is consumed by the plants. And then also not only the volume, but also EC, electrical conductivity, which is the total salt concentration of the nutrient solution, pH, acidity. Those need to be checked for both drip and drain solutions. And EC is a good indicator of the accumulation of salts, and pH needs to be the indicator of good acidity in the root zone. Otherwise, nutrient deficiency might occur, such as high pH driving iron deficiency. So I'm going to go through some of the key technologies to assure the high productivity. Pollination, very important technique. Typical kind of bees used in greenhouse is bumblebees, because bumblebees can function very well inside the greenhouse, which lacks or has some limitation in terms of the light quality that bumblebees or bees can use for orientation. In natural environment or open field environment, pollinations of tomato plants is typically done by wind or bees. Leaf pruning, as I explained earlier, is very important practice to remove the old leaves that are no longer contributing to the crop productivity. And then also removing leaves would enhance the air circulation inside the greenhouse. And cluster pruning to maintain the size of the fruit. If you have too many fruits in the cluster or per cluster, then you might end up with just many small fruits rather than good number of large fruits hanging per cluster. So as you can see, those are having 6 to 7 fruits hanging each cluster, and then that is because number of fruits are maintained that way by doing cluster pruning. Highwire system involves leaning and lowering to maintain canopy location at the always relatively at the same height. Plants keep growing, therefore you are going to lower the plants at the same time, pulling the plants to one direction so that the vines are going to be wrapped around within the row, and all the leaves are removed under the canopy, and then only remaining or leaving somewhere between 12 to 14 leaves in the canopy. Very effective system to maintain active canopy and separating the photosynthetically active canopy location and fruit ripening location, which required some light to get good color. So it's a very good system separating those two. And the ballpark yield in terms of greenhouse production is now 60 kilograms per square meter per year, and which is about 132 pounds per square foot per year. And this yield is probably 10 to 20 times greater than simple system like high tunnel or open field production system. So Highwire production system is very productive greenhouse production method for tomato crop. Another important technique for growing tomato is balancing vegetative and reproductive growth. So vegetative organs or vegetative growth is very important for photosynthesis. If you don't have enough of that, then you don't have energy supply or sugar supply source for the fruits. And at the same time, you would like to maintain good production of the fruits, and therefore you need to maintain good reproductive growth as well. And those two kinds of growth, vegetative growth and reproductive growth, need to be maintained at balance stage. And growers try to maintain so they're steering the plant growth not too reproductive, not too vegetative, by several means such as climate control, temperature control, nutrient management, which I mentioned. Nitrogen is very important for driving vegetative growth and reproductive growth, and then also pruning, leaving suckers intentionally to balance or add more vegetative organs to the canopy, or hard pruning to reduce the vegetative growth relative to the reproductive growth. So this balancing is quite important to make the production more efficient, because you want to produce fruits. You don't want to produce unnecessary amount of leaves and stems. Yet you need to maintain leaves because those are the organs to conduct carbohydrate production, which is photosynthesis. So this slide is summarizing temperature, light, and other conditions to maximize the productivity of hydroponic tomato. So the target day and night temperatures for tomato is 75, 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 2418 degrees C in Celsius. Maximum air temperature needs to be lower than 30 degrees C or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and the minimum air temperature is 12 degrees C or 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Higher temperature than 30 degrees C might cause an issue in pollination, and lower temperature than that might cause also another disorder caused by low temperature, misshaped fruits and things like that. And then also generally plant growth may be very slow at low temperature. Light is very important for greenhouse tomato production. Tomato requires a lot of light, and as long as temperature is maintained, 1% reduction of light is basically 1% reduction of yield. So you want to make sure a lot of light is penetrating in the greenhouse within the canopy. And if the temperature is difficult to maintain, that's the only case to pull the shade to maintain the temperature below the acceptable maximum, which is 30 degrees C. Vapor pressure deficit, it's a variable to express the amount of moisture in the air, and the recommended vapor pressure deficit is somewhere between 0.3 to 1.3 kilopascal. Check with the water vapor module to learn what is VPD. And CO2 concentration is recommended to be 1000 parts per million, but CO2 enrichment can be only done when the greenhouse is not venting. Venting actually make the CO2 enrichment more difficult because much of the CO2 injected in the greenhouse will be escaped by ventilation. But anyway, so those are the key parameters or environmental parameters to assure productivity of tomato crop. Pest and disease management, very important, and the typical pests we have in hydroponic tomato production include whitefly, spider mites, russet mites, aphid, and typical disease we or growers encounter in hydroponic production is blossom end rot, which is a calcium deficiency but driven by environmental conditions. So blossom end rot is the rotten end of the fruit, distal end of the fruit. This happens even though calcium in the nutrient solution is enough. So it's not just concentration of calcium in the solution, but more environmental because calcium is translocated by mass flow or transpiration, so that any environment conditions affecting transpiration or limiting transpiration or too much transpiration might cause blossom end rot. And another disease or disorder often observed in hydroponic tomato production is cracking. Cracking is also related with the water status of the fruit. Too much instantaneous water flux to the fruit could cause cracking. So both cracking and blossom end rot could be avoided by better controlled environment. So the stage of harvesting greenhouse tomato is somewhere between breakers and light red, and hand picking is typical. So this is actually the USDA defined different stages of tomato. Green stage, breakers, turning pink, light red, and red. And typical stage for picking tomatoes for greenhouse is somewhere between breakers and light red, and more commonly done at pink or light red stage. And of course, hand picking is still common practice rather than automated picking. And as soon as fruits are picked, then fruits are transported to the packing house of the greenhouse operation. And some fruits are stored before we distribute it to distributors or wholesale grocery stores. Optimum post-harvest temperature for tomato is known as 12 degrees C, and cold chain needs to be applied to ensure no condensation occurring in fruit surface. Otherwise, it would house fungal disease during the distribution. And packing with optimum ventilation, as you can see in this packing or package, some holes need to be established, although it is very challenging to actually quantify how much ventilation is required. So often it is try and error type of development. Now in the US, varieties of tomatoes are grown in greenhouse, including grape type, cherry type, TOB, beefsteak, and heirloom. And growers need to decide which varieties, which kind of tomatoes to grow, depending on the market, depending on the climate conditions. For example, larger fruit type may be more difficult in hot and warm environment versus cherries and grapes may be more forgiving in terms of temperature conditions. So something like that need to be considered. And then also larger fruit tomato usually have total, large yield compared to small fruits, much lower yield per year, but flavorful. Therefore, the price per quantity, per pound, per kilo may be much higher than beefsteak tomato. So that's pros and cons. Growers always decide through communication with customers or consumers. And further resource, excellent resources available nowadays for tomato. Some of them are books, some of them are online materials. University of Arizona developed a hydroponic tomato greenhouse educational video, and then also course materials that include a lot of information, how to, so you might want to check it out. Also textbook edited by a Dutch scientist, Ep Huvelink, is a very nice in terms of understanding plant physiology and some of the technology. So those three resources are highly recommended for further study of tomato hydroponics in greenhouse. Thank you very much for listening.